So Nathan Moody,
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
Good. I don't do nice, formal, clean starts ever, and I never managed to edit one in, so let's not pretend.
Why start now?
Yeah, why break a habit? Really interesting set this weekend at Velocity. A very different instrument for most people, I would imagine. I'd like to run down the rig rundown, the third one, as you said earlier.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah, and in person, which is nice. So, Sierra Lombard, very banana, which is lovely. You're not using any sequencing. This is a played, you could play a sequencer, of course, but this is a played, humanly interacted instrument. Very different, I think, to a lot of what we see.
Yeah. I guess after performing with Eurorack a few times, in order to get comfortable with that, my systems were fairly large, four rows usually in a suitcase. And I found it very comfortable to perform with. And then I saw footage of me playing, and visually aesthetically, it seemed like I was behind a gigantic laptop.
Okay.
And when I see bands perform or other performers, the two things I always get excited about is a sense of risk.
Yeah.
People playing real notes, hitting wrong notes, the set falling apart, potentially, and a really clear sense of cause and effect. And that's why I love watching even live guitar looping and stuff like that, where you see each layer being built. And it's taken me years to get to the point where I had the confidence to create a rig where I have to touch everything in order to have it make sound. And so for me, my goal continues to be trying to make visual performative gestures that people can generally follow along with. They don't need to know exactly everything I'm doing.
No.
But just to have it be clear that I'm starting from a blank slate. I am running a TR-606, but every pattern is blank when I start. There are no sequencers, and it's all built up through live looping, primarily using the Coco Quantus and using a couple of delay and looping buffer pedals. And I've also found that frees me up to really have a much broader set of possibilities in terms of improvisation, where I'm not locked to just sequences that I've made beforehand or have mutated along the way. And I found it really, really freeing, and is a whole new world for me as a musician. And I've been having a good time with it so far. Yeah.
Well, that answers a question I get a lot, and you may have had similar questions about making drastic changes. It's easy if you're playing, well, it's not easy, of course, but it's easier than a whole tied up, dense, clocked, sequenced patch to make those changes. Talking about visual cues for the audience and cause and effect, as soon as you picked up the bow and the shadow of you with this bow coming up, it's clear as day. I think a flatter system makes a big difference as well. One thing I've seen a lot of people do, but it just works really well, Daedalus used to perform with his monome facing the audience, and I've seen a few modular sets where they're over the top. It's probably not good for your back, but that's great.
Totally. In fact, I was just in Portland, and I was talking to Jonathan Irish, who runs Retromechanical Labs, makes amazing pedals.
Yeah.
He used to be in an industrial band, and to get over that issue, he built a custom rig that was almost like on a Steadicam arm. So he could tilt the entire thing to the audience and play above his head, almost like, off to the side, very, very theatrical, and really gave you the sense that like something real is happening here. And I think that working without sequencers has made me just take way bigger chances. Like I'll everything I do, even when it gets really noisy, I always need a melodic core to it.
Yeah.
And with this system, I have no problem setting up a beautiful harmonized loop and then just pitch diving everything and just pulling it way out of tune. And those kind of big transitions are really fun and bold. And I'm really reticent to do that if I've got a typical sequencer and everything where, I'm going to screw up all my oscillator tuning.
Yeah.
So having ways to do those big transitional gestures is something that I've come to really enjoy.
So speaking about that specifically, what are the kind of mechanics of the system to allow you to do that? Is everything running through a particular chain in series? How are you pulling this together so you can sweep this whole thing rather than piece by piece kind of mess with the tunings?
So the three most critical looping elements in the setup are a Seat Lombard Coco Quantus, which has two really lo-fi 8-bit delays. And there are switches where each delay can just infinitely loop. I'm actually taking a trigger out from the TR-606 so that I can actually clock those loops so that they will re-trigger at the same time if I do want something that's kind of tightly synced. Mm-hmm. Each of those can either have CV control or manual control over the pitch, and at varies speeds.
Yeah.
So it's really like taking a Nagra that you filled with sand and just really cranking this thing down and making it really gritty and slow and lower pitch. And then the other one is a Montreal Assembly count to 5 pedal, which has a bunch of different modes on it. And what's nice about that is it can generate these beautiful blossoming clouds of kind of smeared granular tones, but there are immediate knobs that allow you to change pitch. Okay. And so the Seat Lombard instruments with keys or pressure sensitive bars, I don't change the pitch on most of those. Those are my piano keys during the set. So what's really fun is taking the loops, pitching them down in real time, and then having them land in a harmonic interval back down with some lower tones. So that's kind of my looping strategy on the rig.
And in terms of finding that point to hit, kind of on the spiral of the pitch coming down, is that just by ear? You're just waiting to kind of hit, fifths, octaves, whatever suits, and then you're playing against? Does that become a comfortable thing?
Not entirely. And that's one of the other things that makes me, what I've realized about how I play live. I need the butterflies in my stomach.
You can't be too comfortable.
No, I can't. If I go on stage relaxed, I'm never happy with the outcome. So for me, the excitement of, okay, I know this is a F-sharp 0 on this bass synth, and I'm going to be hitting that, and then I'm going to be just by ear sweeping pitch down, and I'm probably not going to land it perfectly. I might overshoot and pull it back. And if I overshoot, I just keep going. Yeah. And then slowly pull it back up, so it's more of a purposeful gesture.
And how long did it take to develop not rushing that back up? 'Cause it's such an easy thing to be, I've overshot this, and the immediate kind of human instinct, I think, is just to crank the thing back to where you wanted it,
totally.
As opposed to just comfortably taking the audience that bit further and pulling them back.
Years. It's taken years, and I think one of the things that all performers go through is, we get in these flow states where time dilates and our perception of how long things are happening changes. And I've just kept getting feedback again and again and again that my sets were really dense with a lot of actions, and they might not need to be.
Okay.
And so it took me a long time to have the confidence to just slow things down. And, everything that I'm doing that might feel really fast, when it feels fast to me, it's probably really fast for the audience.
Yeah.
And when I feel like it's going on too long, it's probably just about right for the audience.
Yeah.
So it's taken years of practice for me to reach that kind of equilibrium.
Likewise, I'm trying to find a balance of what people really need because there's this whole, as you say, a disconnect completely as to how fast time is moving for you and them. And I don't know anyone that's actually sealed that gap and become kind of one with the audience.
Yeah, it's more of a lifelong journey than
I think so. How much of this setup was brought together to travel? Because you've traveled up for this rig. I don't know if you could fly with this rig particularly, but how much of the decisions on what was in there was based on that and balancing what you maybe wanted but couldn't bring?
Right.
Is it entirely this has to be portable, or is there some excess?
It's extravagant, especially since I wanted to travel with a handmade instrument, the board covered with the stretched springs. It's not huge, but it's heavy and clunky. And as soon as I decided to drive to Seattle, all that tension and stress went away. Yeah. So then I was like, oh, wow, I can just fit all this stuff in my car, and it was much easier. But as anyone who performs with pedals or modules knows, no rig is ever locked and finished. Mm-hmm. So I think a logical next step for this rig would be something that could be performed with a bow that's either collapsible or a much lighter weight that can go in a little box, and trying to get the two pedal boards down into just one. So all the synths and maybe just one critical effects pedal, just to spatialize some of the tones.
Yeah.
I think that would be something I could still easily perform with for 30 minutes or so.
Yeah. And it's a very sonically varied instrument, from the, as you say, mechanical instruments that you've built through to the lo-fi of the Coco Quantus and the hi-fi of some of the pedals. Are you thinking in terms of these colors, moving between kind of palettes and how they blend together? Or is that just how the instrument has come together? Was it a case of those pedals particularly speak to your handmade instrument? I mean, it's not really a question, it's a very weird question, but you maybe get what I mean. You've kind of got the lo-fi-ness, you've got the more hi-fi, you've got a very different tonal palette with the instrument. Are you trying to cross all these borders live, or does it just naturally come together?
Yeah, I love contrasts in the music I listen to. And when I put together any sort of track, even if it's in my studio, I'm always looking for that weird tension between extremely clean, beautiful, hi-fi stuff and very gritty, very visceral stuff. And so you'll notice also I have an iPad plugged into the Coco Quantus for looping. And so that's just got these acoustic instruments that I recorded in the studio, and really clean, and violins and pianos. But then when that slams into this 8-bit delay, it just gets fuzzy and weird. And a lot of other artists like lo-fi techniques, like with tape, to give a sense of nostalgia or memory and stuff like that. And my whole motivation for creating work for me is a bit of an emotion sink, where I take the stresses and tensions of life and the world around us, and I put that into my music. So for me, having that kind of visceral, cathartic tension along with some element of harmony is a critical part of how I work.
And how much do you think, I mean, I kind of know the answer, that your production background has influenced this? Because it talks to producing an album or an EP or a layered piece of work. I mean, you're not multi-tracking. This is live and improvised. It's not sequenced as you used to work. But each of these colours, to me, is kind of how I would think about piecing together a song, an EP, an album. Is it very much an influence, or do you somewhat feel distant from that work. I guess you can never feel that distant.
Yeah, not really. I'm of the age where I still consider the album or EP as a long form body of work that can be listened to and really take you on a journey. And for me, that's all a live set is too, often about the same length as an EP. And so I tend to think about my live performances are never a series of songs. It's just movements in one piece. And on those rare opportunities I get to play multiple times in the same city or to a similar crowd, I want it to be different every time. And my mood in those cities and how I got there and the stories that led me to that show, all of that informs every show uniquely. And I want to have that expressed so that someone can see me 3 times in a row. And there's always an element of unpredictability.
Yeah. It's really interesting how the whole thing has come together sonically and the actual instrument itself. Of course, a lot of people watching are very much into the instrument itself. Maybe music is a side thing to some, but it's very much where I'm at the minute. I have a patch and a rig that I very much like. I'm not quite sure that I'm there yet, improvising. Again, movements as opposed to songs. But I've played it a few times while I've been out here, and I find myself making very similar moves. And maybe that's just my headspace. It'll be interesting when I get home to see how that changes. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I'm not there or the patch isn't there. But it's an interesting journey.
Absolutely. The synth master Todd Barton, his term for that is just follow the sound. And so it's almost like as you perform, you're always doing this constant gap analysis of what am I hearing? Are there gaps in rhythm or timing or timbre or frequency? And is there an opportunity to fill in those gaps? And you usually want to leave some of those gaps open. Otherwise, you're playing white noise
dynamically. Yeah,
it's flat. And but I think for improvisation, that's really a key. And I think I still am very much locked into every live set is in a certain musical key, and I don't yet have the exploratory confidence to do something that's completely atonal. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll get there someday. Maybe that's just not part of my artistic voice. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, that's just the journey we're all on.